The air was still, heavy with the weight of 1,000 eyes watching. Commander Rena Cole stood alone in the middle of a wide arena, its walls made of black stone and steel. The floor beneath her boots was dusty and scarred, as if many things had fought and died there before. Above her, rows of alien faces stared down from tiered seats, their skin gleaming under the pale blue light. Some hissed, others clicked their teeth, all waiting for what was about to happen. Across the arena, high on a raised platform, sat the alien warlord. He was huge, his shoulders wrapped in plates of dark armor, his eyes cold and full of pride. His name was Kareth, ruler of the Zorath Dominion, and in his mind, it already won. "You came here to speak of peace," Kareth said, his deep voice echoing through the space. "But peace is built on strength. Today, human, you will see true strength, and you will know your place." Rena didn't reply. She simply stood with her hands in her jacket pockets, her head tilted slightly to one side, as if she were waiting for something far more interesting than his speech. The warlord lifted one clawed hand. Somewhere behind him, massive metal doors began to rumble. Thick locks clanked open one by one. The sound rolled through the arena like distant thunder. The crowd stirred. Rena felt the vibration in the floor, heavy, slow, deliberate. Each step on the other side of those doors made the stone beneath her shift ever so slightly. Whatever was. Inside was massive. When the final locks snapped free, the doors slid apart, revealing blackness inside. For a long moment, nothing came out. Then 2 points of red light appeared in the darkness, eyes glowing faintly, moving forward. The creature stepped into the light, and the arena erupted in roars of approval from the alien audience. It was taller than 3 men, its thick body covered in overlapping plates of bone-like armor. Its arms ended in hooked claws, each the length of a sword. Its head was wedge-shaped, its jaw lined with teeth that dripped clear saliva onto the sand. The Gorath Rena had heard the name before. It was whispered in war briefings, always with warnings attached. It had wiped out entire settlements on frontier worlds. The Zorath Dominion used it not just as a weapon, but as a message: resist us. And this is what comes for you. The Gorath let out a low growl, a sound so deep it seemed to vibrate inside her chest. Its tail, thick as a tree trunk, scraped against the ground. The smell of it reached her, a sharp, animal musk, mixed with the metallic temps of old blood. Kareth leaned forward in his seat. This is the apex of evolution. We're born to hunt, built to kill. No creature in the galaxy can stand before it. The Gorath began to walk toward her, each step slow but full of power, its claws sinking into the sand. The crowd grew louder, some chanting, some making strange guttural calls. Rena's eyes followed the beast's movements, calm and steady. Inside, her heart rate stayed even. This wasn't the first time she had faced something designed to frighten her. The trick was never to give the fear what it wanted. When the Gorath was only 10 meters away, it stopped. Its nostrils flared, tasting the air between them. A low rumble built in its chest. It tilted its head slightly, studying her like a puzzle it would soon take apart. The alien warlord's voice cut through the noise. "You have one chance, human, Neil, and perhaps I will let you live." Rena took a slow breath, then smiled. Not wide, not mocking, but the kind of smile that said she knew something he did. She pulled one hand from her pocket. 2 fingers rose to her lips. The sound of her whistle was sharp and clear, slicing through the roar of the crowd. Carried across the arena, over the high walls, into the open land beyond, the Gorath froze. The crowd noticed it too. The beast's head turned slightly, its ears twitching, its eyes no longer locked on her. Kareth frowned. "What is this?" Rena didn't answer. She whistled again, longer this time, the note rising and then falling in a way that made even. Some of the aliens tilt their heads, as if hearing something unfamiliar, far away. Beyond the arena walls, a sound drifted back. It was faint at first, too faint for many to hear, but it was there. A deep, rolling growl. The Goroth's stance shifted. Its tail went still. Its claws flexed against the sand, not in preparation to strike, but in unease. The growl came. Again, closer now, louder. It didn't sound like any engine or weapon. It was alive. Whatever made it was big. The alien crowd quieted, a ripple of uncertainty moving through them. The warlord leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "This is not possible," he muttered. The Goroth took a step back. Rina's smile widened, just a little. She didn't look at the warlord. She kept her eyes on the gates at the far end of the arena, not the ones the Goroth had come through, but the heavy, sealed doors leading outside. The growl deepened, so powerful now that the very ground seemed to tremble beneath their feet. Dust drifted down from the high stone walls. The Goroth's head lowered, its armored plates shifting in a defensive posture. Rina slipped her other hand from her pocket, resting it loosely at her side. Her voice, calm and even, carried easily across the silent arena. "You showed me yours," she said softly. "Now let me show you mine." The sound outside the arena changed, no longer just a growl, but a thudding impact. Something massive was moving toward them. The alien guards at the outer gate turned to look at each other, unsure whether to ready their weapons or run. Another impact, louder, closer. The Goroth's breath came faster now, its chest rising and falling, its eyes locked on those unseen doors. The warlord rose to his feet, his claws gripping the rail before him. "What is this, human?" Rina didn't answer, just kept watching the doors. The next impact was followed by a sound like tearing metal. Something outside was forcing its way in. Screams erupted from the alien soldiers on the other side of the wall. A final crash shook the arena, sending a wave of dust through the air. The crowd was no longer cheering. They were whispering, shifting in their seats, unsure. The Goroth gave a low, uncertain hiss. Rina raised her fingers to her lips one last time and let out a single, short whistle. The answering roar that came back was not just loud, it was wrong, carrying with it the promise of something older, faster, dawn, far more dangerous than anything the Zoroth Dominion had ever bred. The Goroth's claws scraped backward across the sand, and for the first time in his life, Karath felt something cold crawl up his spine, because the human wasn't afraid. She was waiting. The Goroth's roar ripped through the arena, a sound of challenge and rage. But even as it echoed off the high stone walls, another sound followed, a deep, thrumming call that didn't belong to it. The alien crowd went silent again, their earlier excitement replaced by unease. They could feel it in their bones. Something was coming, something that the human had called up on the platform. Kareth, his expression tightened. "This is a trick," he growled. "No creature can rival the Goroth." But his voice didn't carry the same confidence as before. The Goroth shifted its weight uneasily, its head turning toward the massive outer gates. Its ears twitched at each distant thump of approaching footsteps. The sand trembled with every impact. Rina didn't move from where she stood. Her stance was loose, casual even, but her eyes never left the gates. She knew the timing. She had done this before. The whistle wasn't random. It was a signal, one her companion would never ignore, beyond the arena walls. A long, low growl rolled in, louder now, close enough to make the steel gates shudder. It wasn't the same as the Goroth's roar. The sound was lower, heavier, carrying a strange, deliberate rhythm, a predator's announcement. The Goroth let out a warning snarl, as if to tell whatever was outside that this was its hunting ground. Some of the alien soldiers near the gates glanced at each other nervously. One of them raised his weapon, then lowered it again when Kareth barked an order. "Hold your ground. The crowd began to murmur, some of them leaning forward to see better, others shifting back in their seats. Another impact came, a slam against the gates, harder than before. The thick metal groaned under the force. Dust sifted down from the hinges. Rina's lips curved upward just slightly. Her voice was calm, but it carried far enough for Kareth to hear. "You should have kept your monster in its cage, warlord." The Goroth bared its teeth and stepped forward, claws gouging deep furrows into the sand. But the step wasn't toward her. It was toward the gates. It knew where the threat was now. The sound came again, this time a roar so deep it rattled the air. The gate shook violently, one hinge screeching in protest. Karath snarled and gestured to his beast. "Show this human your power! Tear her apart before, but the Goroth didn't move toward her." It stayed facing the gates, muscles tight, tail stiff. Its eyes flickered with something rare for a predator like it. Not rage, not hunger. Wariness. The warlord's voice faltered. "What?" The thundering footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. It was the kind of stillness that came right before something struck. Rena slowly pulled her other hand from her pocket and rested both at her sides. She knew what that pause meant. Her companion had arrived and was waiting for her word. Her whistle this time was different, short, sharp, and rising in pitch like a command. The response came instantly. A deafening crash tore through the arena as the gates buckled inward. One hinge ripped free with a screech of metal. The other twisted, half broken. Through the gap, dust swirled, and in the swirling haze a massive shape began to form. Karatha's eyes widened. No, it can't be. The Goroth's growl deepened, but it took another step back. Its claws scraped against the stone foundation beneath the sand. The shape beyond the gates grew clearer, tall, broad, moving with a smooth, heavy grace. Two glowing eyes cut through the dust, pale and cold. The alien crowd had stopped making any sound at all. Every being in the arena was staring at the gates, as if they could feel the same thing the Goroth felt, the weight of a predator's gaze on them. Rena's smile returned. "Come on, girl," she said softly. "Let's show them what human monsters look like." The Goroth lowered its head and gave a loud, threatening hiss from the other side of the gate. The answering roar shattered the last hinge, a roar layered with something alien and something deeply unsettlingly intelligent. The gates fell inward, and the thing Rena had called stepped into the arena. The dust from the fallen gates swirled thick in the arena air, turning the alien sun into a pale disk overhead. Massive moved in the haze, massive and deliberate, but no one could see them clearly yet. The silence from the crowd was total. Even the ever-noisy Zorith warriors in the high tiers had stopped their gears. The Goroth crouched low, claws digging deep grooves in the sand. Its tail was stiff as a steel rod, and its armored plates shifted over its shoulders like a reflexive shield. It didn't move forward. It didn't charge. It was waiting. Two pale, cold eyes appeared in the dust. They were far apart, set low, scanning not the crowd, but the Goroth itself. When they locked onto the beast, the Goroth growled again, but the sound lacked the full power of before. A shape emerged, first ahead, elongated and framed by thick ridges that swept back like a crown of bone. Its muzzle was broad, ending in a black, scarred nose that twitched at the scent of the Goroth. Each breath came as a slow, deep rumble. Then the rest followed. Body built like a predator from Earth's wild past, yet wrong in subtle ways. Smooth. Muscle rippled under short, dark fur, patterned with faint streaks that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. Along its back, raised segments of plated armor caught the glow of the arena lamps, curving down to a tail that lashed with controlled precision. The creature's claws were different from the Goroth's, less hooked, more like sharpened blades. Gleaming as if polished, its movements were low and fluid, almost cat-like, yet every step made the ground thud. Rena's voice cut through the tense quiet. "Meet Nyx." The name meant nothing to the Zoroth. The Goroth reacted not to the name, but to the creature's posture. Nyx moved not like prey, not like a challenger, but like something that had already decided the outcome of this meeting. Karath gripped the edge of his platform railing, his claws scraping faint lines into the metal. "What is that thing?" His voice was low, but in the silence, everyone heard it. Rena didn't take her eyes off the two beasts. "She's ours. Grew her ourselves, not bred to kill for sport, not a trophy. She's a partner." The Goroth took a step forward, muscles bunching. Nyx didn't flinch. She simply shifted her weight slightly, lowering her head, and letting out a deep rolling growl. It wasn't loud, but it carried a weight that made several alien spectators tense involuntarily. Nyx's eyes never left the Goroth. She was reading it, measuring it. The warlord gave a short, sharp gesture. "Kill it." The Goroth responded instantly, charging forward with a roar, sand exploding under its claws. Nyx didn't move until the very last moment. When she did, it was with sudden, almost impossible speed, a blur of muscle and shadow. She sidestepped, pivoted, and slammed her shoulder into the Goroth's flank. The impact was like a cannon shot. The Goroth stumbled, sand spraying. The crowd gasped, not because Nyx had hit hard, but because she had hit with intent. It wasn't a wild strike. It was calculated. Rina's lips curved in that same calm smile. She didn't shout commands. She didn't have to. Nyx knew what to do. The Goroth whirled, snarling, but Nyx was already moving again, low, quick, darting in and out of the Goroth's reach. She wasn't trying to kill it outright. She was testing it. Karath leaned forward, frustration on his face. "Your pet is fast. But speed means nothing against the Goroth's power." "Let's see," Rina murmured. The Goroth lunged, claws sweeping across the sand, aiming to pin Nyx, but Nyx didn't retreat. She stepped inside its reach, twisting her body so the Goroth's claw passed just behind her. In the same motion, her own claws raked across the Goroth's side, not deep enough to wound fatally, but enough to cut through one of its thick armor plates. The alien crowd reacted instantly, sharp intakes of breath, murmurs, some outright exclamations. No one had ever seen the Goroth's armor breached in a single strike. The Goroth roared, enraged now, and came at her with a flurry of swipes and bites. Nyx stayed just ahead of each one, her movements fluid and precise. The sound of claws scraping stone, the thud of their heavy bodies, and the deep growls from both filled the arena, and through it all, Rina just stood there, hands loose at her sides, watching like someone who had already seen this play out in her mind. The Goroth finally landed a glancing hit, its claw striking Nyx's shoulder. She staggered back a half step, then straightened. Instead of retreating, she tilted her head slightly and made a sound. Not a roar, not a snarl, but something. Low and almost amused, the Goroth hesitated. Rina smiled wider. Now, she's interested. Nyx moved faster than before. The sand shook under the pounding of claws. The Goroth lunged with all its massive weight, its jaws snapping shut with a sound like a steel trap. Nyx twisted to the side, her claws biting into the sand for traction, her body a blur as she dodged. The Goroth's teeth closed on empty air, and its head slammed into the ground with a dull thud, sending dust and grit flying. The crowd roared at the near hit, their voices echoing off the high arena walls. Some shouted the Goroth's name in the guttural language of the Zeroth, while others jeered at Nyx, certain she wouldn't survive long. Rina stood motionless in the center of the arena, her hands still at her sides. Her eyes never left the fight, but she didn't shout commands. Nyx didn't need them. The Goroth recovered quickly, swinging one massive claw toward her. The strike could have torn a smaller creature in half, but Nyx ducked low and darted in. Under the blow, her shoulder slammed into the Goroth's ribs, hard enough to make the beast grunt and stagger. Before it could react, her claws flashed, leaving 3 deep grooves across the armor plates on its side. The sound of tearing armor made several in the crowd hiss in disbelief. The Goroth's plates were supposed to be impenetrable, forged by nature and refined by Dominion breeding for generations. Yet Nyx had marked them as if they were nothing. Enraged, the Goroth snapped its tail like a whip. The heavy spiked end caught Nyx in the flank and sent her skidding across the sand. She dug in with her claws, stopping her slide, but the hit had been solid. She shook her head once, then lowered it again, locking back on her opponent. The Goroth charged. This time Nyx didn't dodge. She met it head-on. The impact was like a shockwave, a deep boom that rattled the arena stands. Sand exploded around them, and the force made even the closest alien guards stumble back a step. Both beasts grappled, claws raking, teeth snapping. The Goroth tried to use its sheer size to overpower her, pressing down with its forelimbs and snapping at her neck. Nyx twisted, her plated shoulders deflecting the bite, slashed upward, tearing into the softer flesh beneath the Gorth's jaw. Blood sprayed across the sand, dark and thick. The Gorth roared in fury and pain, thrashing violently. Nyx held her ground, using her smaller frame and speed to avoid the wild strikes, her claws darting in quick, precise cuts. Up in his seat, Kareth leaned forward, gripping the railing so tightly his claws cut grooves into the metal. His confident smirk from earlier was gone. Now, his eyes darted between the Gorth's wounds and the human standing so calmly below. Nyx suddenly feinted left, drawing the Gorth into a clumsy lunge. In that moment, she spun right and raked her claws across its hind leg. The beast stumbled, its knee buckling for a fraction of a second. But in a fight like this, that was enough. Nyx surged upward, her forelimbs wrapping around the Gorth's neck, and her weight drove it down into the sand. The arena shook with the impact. The crowd exploded into a mix of cheers and horrified cries. The Gorth twisted violently, muscles bulging, and managed to throw her off. Both beasts sprang apart, circling, their breaths heavy and loud in the sudden silence. The sand between them was dark with blood, the Gorth's, not Nyx's. Nyx's chest rose and fell steadily, her glowing eyes fixed on her opponent with the same calm Rena wore on her own face. The Gorth, panting hard now, lowered its head and growled, but this time it sounded less like a challenge and more like a warning it hoped would be heeded. Rena finally spoke, her voice quiet but carrying across the arena. "You're losing, Kareth." The warlord didn't answer. His jaw was tight, his claws still gripping the railing. The Gorth made one last desperate charge. Nyx didn't move until it was almost on her. Then she ducked under its bite, slammed her shoulder into its chest, and knocked it onto its side. In the same movement, she planted a clawed foot on its throat. The Gorth froze. Nyx didn't press down. She just stayed there, holding the position, her growl low and steady. The meaning was clear. The fight was over. The Gorth's sides heaved, with ragged breaths, each exhale sending puffs of hot steam into the cooling air. The arena was utterly still. No one in the crowd moved. No one spoke. Even the Zorith warriors in the high tiers, the ones who had been chanting the Gorth's name minutes ago, had fallen silent. Nyx stood tall over the fallen beast, one clawed foot planted firmly on its throat. Her chest rose and fell with slow, controlled breaths, as though the fight had been nothing more than a warm-up. Her gaze never left the Gorth's eyes. It was a predator's stare, not gloating, not taunting, just certain. Rena finally moved. She took one calm step forward, her boots crunching softly in the blood-stained sand. The sound was enough to draw every eye in the arena to her. She didn't look at Kareth, not yet. Her attention stayed on Nyx, and the corner of her mouth lifted into a small, approving smile. "That's enough, girl," she said quietly. Nyx's ear twitched at her voice. But she didn't move her foot from the Gorth's throat. The Gorth's chest rose and fell faster now, a low rumble of frustration vibrating in its massive frame. It didn't dare move, not with Nyx's claws poised to strike. Up on the platform, Kareth's hands gripped the railing so hard his knuckles went pale under his scaled skin. His jaw worked, but no words came. Rena finally lifted her gaze to him. "Your beast is strong," she said, "but it's not the strongest." A few murmurs rippled through the crowd at her words. The idea alone that anything could match, let alone surpass, the Gorth was unthinkable to the Zorath. Kareth's lips curled back in a snarl. "This proves nothing." "One fight this," Rena interrupted, her voice firm but still calm, "proves everything." She took another step forward, her eyes locked on his. "You wanted to show me power. You wanted to intimidate me." Failed. The warlord's nostrils flared, but he said nothing. Rena's gaze flicked to the Gorth. "Call it off," she said. "Order it to submit before it gets hurt worse." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Kareth's pride was a living thing in the air between them, thick and heavy. He wanted to deny her, to refuse outright. But the Gorth's shuddering breaths and Nyx's unflinching control left him no path to save face without making a choice. Silence stretched until Karatha's voice came, low and grudging. "Stand down." The Goroth growled faintly, its muscles tensing, but the warlord's tone had weight. Slowly it relaxed, lowering its head to the sand in a gesture of submission. Nyx stepped back, lifting her foot from its throat, but she didn't take her eyes off it. She moved with that same slow, deliberate grace, positioning herself just close enough that the Gorath knew she could strike again if needed. Rena folded her arms, her voice cutting through the arena. "Now, we talk about my terms." Kareth, eyes narrowed. "Terms. You're going to release every human prisoner your dominion has taken," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument.
Ow.
"And you're going to withdraw from every human colony you've occupied in the last decade." A ripple of shock went through the crowd, low murmurs, sharp hisses, and the sound of claws scraping metal. These were not the words of a beaten diplomat. These were demands made from a position of absolute strength. Karatha's laugh was short and humorless. "You think one victory in an arena gives you such power?" Rena glanced at Nyx. "Do you think this is the only one that shut him up?" The question hung in the air unanswered. Rena let the silence speak for her. Then she took a final step closer, her voice lowering, her words meant for him alone. "If you refuse, I whistle again. Next time I don't stop her." Kareth's claws tapped slowly against the railing, his eyes cold. But there was calculation in them now. Not anger, not arrogance, but something far more dangerous. Understanding. "Leave the arena," he said finally. "We will discuss your demands." Rena nodded once. "Good choice." Nyx let out one last low growl at the Goroth, then turned and padded to Rena's side. Together they walked toward the gates they had entered through, leaving behind the silence of a crowd that had just witnessed something they would speak of for generations. Kareth watched them go, his jaw tight. For the first time he was thinking not about the human in his arena, but about the shadow that might answer if she ever whistled again. The chamber where the negotiations were held was nothing like the arena. Here there were no roaring crowds, no sand stained with blood. The air was still, cool, and heavy with the scent of alien incense. The walls were made of dark stone carved with Zoroth war victories, a history written in violence. Commander Rena Cole stood at one end of a long obsidian table. The other sat Kareth, flanked by his highest-ranking advisors. The Goroth was gone, presumably back in its reinforced cage, though the faint sound of its restless movements could be felt through the floor. Nyx lay on the ground to Rena's right, her head resting on her forelimbs, eyes half-lidded but alert. Every so often she shifted her gaze to one of the alien guards in the corners, just to remind them she was there. None dared look at her for long. Kara's voice was low, measured, almost polite, but Rena could feel the anger simmering. Beneath it, "You made your point in the arena. Now we speak like leaders, not beasts." "I agree," Rena said calmly, "so let's get to it." She placed a small datapad on the table and slid it forward. "These are the locations of every human prisoner currently in Dominion custody. You will have them transported to neutral territory within 72 hours. Kareth glanced at the datapad but didn't pick it up. "That's a bold demand."
Adrena
tilted her head slightly. "It's not as bold as unleashing your apex predator in a peace meeting." One of the alien advisors hissed at that, but Kareth silenced him with a raised claw. "Continue. You will also withdraw all Dominion forces from human colonies taken in the last decade," Rena said. "Every soldier, every ship, every spy." The warlord leaned back in his chair, studying her. "You make it sound so simple. These worlds are valuable to us. Why would we give them up without compensation?" Rena's gaze flicked down to Nyx, who was lazily flexing her claws against the stone floor. "Because the cost of keeping them just went up." The advisor, to Kareth's left, slammed a clawed hand against the table. "Threat's reality," Rena interrupted. Her voice stayed calm, steady. "You saw what one of ours can do. Imagine if I brought more." That silenced the room. Even Karath's expression hardened in thought. "You would go to war?" he asked. "If you make me," Rena said. "But I'd prefer not to. This is your chance to walk away without losing more than your pride." The warlord's claws tapped slowly against the armrest of his chair. And if I refuse? Rena didn't look away. Then the next whistle isn't for an audience. The two leaders locked eyes for a long moment. Around them, the advisors and guards stayed perfectly still, as if afraid any movement would break. The tense balance in the room. Finally, Kareth leaned forward, his voice a quiet growl. "You're dangerous, human." Rena's lips curved faintly. "And you're learning." The warlord gestured to the datapad. 72 hours. "If you break this agreement, you'll try again," Rena finished for him. "And I'll answer." Kareth's eyes narrowed, but he didn't speak again. Instead, he rose, signaling the end of the meeting. Rena gave a short nod and turned toward the door. Out. Nyx rose silently beside her, the sound of her claws clicking. Softly on the stone floor, as they stepped out into the open air, Rena glanced over her shoulder just once. Kareth was still standing there, watching them go. This time, his expression wasn't just anger, it was calculation, as though he was already planning for the day they might meet again. Rena didn't mind. She knew exactly what she'd do if that day came. The battlefield was silent. Not the silence of peace, the silence that comes after something too fast, too brutal for the mind to catch up. Smoke drifted over the scorched plains, where Dominion armor had once stood in neat, threatening lines. Now those lines were broken, shattered, burning. Nyx moved slowly through the wreckage, her massive shoulders rippling with each step. Her armor plates were streaked with soot and blood, none of it hers. Every alien soldier still alive gave her a wide berth, keeping their weapons lowered.
Ow.
They'd learned the hard way what raising them meant. At the center of the field, Rena stood on the ruins of a downed Dominion walker, her boots leaving prints in the warped metal. She raised 2 fingers to her lips and let out a single, sharp whistle. Every head turned. Nyx's ears twitched, and she stopped mid-step. Her glowing eyes found Rena instantly, and she began to move toward her slow, deliberate, each step sending a tremor through the ground. Dominion soldiers who had been regrouping froze. Some began to back away. Rena didn't speak. She didn't need to. Nyx reached the base of the wreck, leaped effortlessly up beside her, and stood still, towering over the field. Together, they looked down at what remained of the Dominion force. "You get one chance," Rena said at last, her voice carrying clear across the smoking battlefield. "Drop your weapons. Leave this world. Never come back." A murmur rippled. Through the alien ranks, a few tried to stand tall, to hold on to their pride. Then Nyx's tail lashed once, smashing a chunk of broken armor into the dirt, and the rest began to throw down their rifles. Within minutes, the Dominion was retreating, limping back to their ships under the watchful eyes of human forces. No. One tried to resist. Kareth was nowhere to be seen. Whether he had fled or was still out there, Rena didn't care. This was over for now. The wind shifted, carrying away some of the smoke. And for the first time in hours, the sky was visible. Again. Nyx sat beside Rena, her breathing steady, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Rena rested a hand on her companion's armored neck. "Good girl," she murmured. Somewhere deep inside the Dominion's territory, this day would be remembered. Not as a battle won or lost, but as the day a human had called her beast, and the galaxy had learned to listen.